all can hear me well? I have to ask this, right? We have been on remote calls, and this is the first question I think everybody asked for the last 3 years, right? So like we said, I'm here to talk about a thing or two about workload portability, right? What it means to hybrid cloud adoption, what it means to migration, and what it means to business continuity. Plus, there is a new term called repatriation. We'll talk a little bit about how it helps in each one of those. So let's first define, right, so that we set a level stage and we get to a common definition. So there are two aspects of workload portability that we want to talk about, or we define it as. The first being the actual movement, ability to move from any cloud to any cloud, right? And what do we mean? It's not mobility, right? Because in mobility you do by tiers of the architecture. In portability, we are talking of taking the entire virtual instance, including the data, the platform, the application, guest OS, and being able to move to any other cloud. So that's number one. Second is this movement that we are talking has to be seamless, has to be secure, has to be cost effective, and most importantly, should be able to do in a consistent SLA time frame. It cannot be that if my workload is 10 GB, you will get 10 minutes recovery SLA. If it is 1 terabyte, then God is there to help us and we don't know when it will come up, right? So that's the definition. Going to why we need to talk about it now, right? Especially now, right? We have identified few reasons, right? Number one is hybrid cloud. I'm sure everybody in this room is looking at hybrid cloud, and it's going to grow. There is absolutely no question about it, right? Finally, like I said, the term repatriation is gaining momentum. People are talking about, oh, what are my choices, right? How do I come back if I have to come back? Those conversations are happening. FinOps, right? We heard a lot about FinOps just in the past presentation, right? Right cloud, right size, most importantly, am I paying the right price, right? That is the question everybody is asking, and there has to be an answer to that. Finally, hybrid cloud, that has actually made the complexity of DR, has made it more complex, more expensive, but still we are not getting the value for the money and the dollars that we are spending. Last but not the least, freedom of choice. I don't want to be constrained by which cloud I can go or I be told to which cloud to go, right? I should be able to choose, right? With this, these are some of the reasons, right? Now with this set as a foundation, let's talk about Datamotive. What do we do, right? So we are a full workload portability solution. Any cloud to any cloud with a recovery SLA of 10 minutes, irrespective of the size of the workload or type of the workload, right? So I'll give it 5 minutes to sink in. To reiterate, you can take your workload from any cloud to any cloud. That's number one. Second, the recovery SLA is 10 minutes flat, right? No questions asked. Third, the recovery is done using target native infrastructure only. So we don't have to bring storage arrays, right? We don't have to bring agents, right? Nothing of that sort, right? So, with all of you with me so far? Perfect. So how do we do this, right? We are making a very big claim here that 10 minutes per workload, we will recover it, right? So it's a very big claim. So how do we do this? Let me explain a little bit. So portability has three connotations or three aspects of it, right? Number one is how do we replicate? How do I replicate the workload? Second is how do I retain the workload on the target cloud? And finally, most important, how do I recover the workload on the target cloud? Right? So we'll talk a little bit about each one of them. So first is replication, right? Datamotive replication engine is a grounds up from scratch build engine based on change block tracking APIs. Every replication product does that. There's nothing different that we do. What we do differently is we replicate in a manner that is 100% data consistency. It ensures 100% data consistency when it is doing it. It comes with an auto resume feature. So let's say you copied 40% and your network went down. Datamotive engine will not start from 0. It will start from 41%. Right? So think of gaining of efficiencies that we are getting as I talk about it. Compression, encryption, DUD, all part of standard feature set. We don't charge extra for any of these. Right? It's not like in small black ink it is written which you can't read and all of that. Finally, we believe this is the only engine that allows for differential reverse replication. For some reason you went to a target cloud, you didn't like it, please come back, no problem. That replication will be differential reverse only. You won't have to bring the entire workload back to the source cloud. So that's the last part. Secondly, and the last part in terms of replication, we allow you to configure your RPOs in terms of groups of workloads. So it is not one site fits all, but you decide which group should get what RPO. Right? So that's about replication. Retaining, how do we retain? Right? Number one, we retain the data in the target native infrastructure. No hydration, no conversion of data required. Thereby, no chances of data getting lost. That is the most important thing. We store using target native infrastructure. We will not ask you to bring a 120,000 storage array to help us store, right? What is available, we will use that. If you are on AWS, we will use EBS. If you are on Azure, blob storage. If you are on VMware, data store. Exactly what we get, right? We do not need, right? We do not need a single compute or a single network resource required to do steady state replication and store it. 0, right? We deliver 60%. Just imagine you have no compute, no network running, only storage, which is probably the cheapest asset on any cloud today, right? So we bring 60% reduced TCO. And hence the reduced egress cost, right? So that's how we retain. Let's talk about recovery. Like I said, we will recover using target native infrastructure. So let's say it was a VMware instance, you are going to AWS, it will be recovered using AWS EC2, AWS EBS, and the AWS network services. Exactly what you had on VMware, you will get on AWS as a native instance. We allow for scripts. You can execute scripts during replication, during recovery, for each instance, for each group. The aim is to deliver a true single-click recovery experience. That is the goal, and that is what we will look to accomplish. Finally, you do not have to do serial recoveries. We allow for parallel recoveries based on the tiers of the architecture. You can actually recover all your database instances in parallel. So if you have 2, all 2 will be recovered within 10 minutes in parallel. If you have 5 app instances, all 5 will be recovered in parallel. Imagine the efficiency and the speed that you will get as part of your entire DR event or a recovery process, or for that matter migration, or for that matter in terms of repatriations. Recover in 10 minutes, that is our single most differentiator. 10 minutes irrespective of the size, irrespective of the source cloud, irrespective of the type of the workload, right? Next, let's look at the architecture itself, right? So the first thing that we get asked is, how do you do it, right? Is it secure, right? It's a very, very valid question. So the way we have looked at security is in 4 buckets. Number 1, the security of the source workload. Number 2, the security of the data that is being replicated. Number 3, the security of the data that is being replicated. And number 4, the security of the recovered instance itself. With that in mind, essentially, Datamotive is an appliance-only hosted deployment that will sit in the organization's tenancy both on the target and the source cloud, right? The appliances are all CIF compliant, Qualys scanned, and operate on a private IP. We don't need public IPs to operate. For doing the replication of data, we will use the existing network profile. Whether it is VPN, whether it is Direct Connect, Express Route, MPLS, doesn't matter, right? So essentially with these 2 design principles, the data will never leave the organization's landscape. No data theft, no data loss, no worrying about, oh, my data is on the internet, nothing of that sort. Being an agentless architecture, right, there is zero impact on terms of performance, security, or capacity on the source workloads. Finally, we will recover your compliance controls as is. For example, if your disk was encrypted on the source, it will be encrypted on the target. If you had masking on the source, the masking will be recovered on the target itself. Right? Finally, as everybody allows for escape room drills, nothing fancy, right? But with Datamotive, when you do the drills, you can still continue running your source workloads and the replication will still continue. So essentially, you're doing a drill, a functional DR drill, without having to stop your source and your replication itself. So what are our offerings, right? Big claims, etc., etc. There are two offerings, migration and DR, right? We call it easy migrate and easy DR because we are making things easy, right? We do lift and shift. As of today, just being completely honest and transparent, we will reduce your migration with a 10-minute recovery SLA, right? So essentially, you will exactly know how much time you're going to take for your cutover, along with the recovery drills that you will do. We allow you to do unlimited recovery drills. We don't charge for the recovery drills, right? Finally, if you don't like being on the target cloud, come back. Reverse replication, come back to where you were, no problems, right? Now, easy DR, let's say you have two DR sites, the workload is now hypervisor agnostic, so now you can consolidate in one DR site. If you want to go from same cloud to same cloud, possible in different region, different geographies, no problem. Exactly the same workflow, the same SLAs, everything will be the same. Spoke about the 10-minute recovery. I spoke about the single-click recovery experience, 60% lower TCO. How do we achieve it? And most importantly, with reverse replication, you actually can come back seamlessly to your primary site, right? You don't have to do actual cutovers and all the planning and all that, right? So that's essentially what happens. So again, transparency perspective, what we support today, we support all virtualized instances, Windows and Linux. From a source cloud, today we support VMware, AWS and Azure. Target is VMware on public private cloud, AWS, Azure and GCP, right? So when you think this is a matrix support model, any source workloads on any of these three clouds can be recovered, migrated on any of these four clouds. So that is how the matrix wants, no restriction on regions. So what workflow? What is our workflow, right? 6 simple steps. Number 1, basic information. Number 2 is instance-specific information like the compute, the target compute, the storage type you want to use, the security groups that you want to use, and the scripts that you want to do. Boot order. Boot order is what will facilitate the parallel recoveries of instances. Finally, the group level information, your RPOs, your encryption, your compression, dedupe, differential reverse replication, group level properties that you set. And finally, group level scripts, right? Like I want to test do a dollar test. Write a script, do your dollar test. We will execute it for you. You don't have to execute it outside the workflow. Finally, how do you execute the workflow? We have a user interface, APIs, and SDKs. Pricing wise, we are a flat OpEx. No variability based on data rate change, data transferred. For migration, one-time fee. For DR, it is a monthly subscription. So at this point, I want to introduce our partner, Shantanu Patra from Wipro. He leads the cloud advisory and the site reliability within Wipro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Shantanu Patra to the stage.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I believe you have all the leaders out here, right? One thing I can start my discussion telling that today, when anyone comes to meet you, they have to take an appointment, but disaster does not. It comes uninvited. So at any given point in time, anytime you're building a strategy for your enterprise, it becomes very, very critical to have a plan in place. Now, when we talk about it, Samir and a lot of the other guests also today, they have spoken about cloud. Now, what we talk about today, any analyst or anywhere you go discussion, you get into any boardroom for enterprise planning, hybrid is the end state, right? As of now, you don't see any customer, telling somebody of them going completely to public cloud. But when you have hybrid, you do not like to have multiple solutions coming into play where one solution only for my physical or my data center or my private cloud and one solution for my public cloud. This kind of solutions drives those from an enterprise decision making perspective, like one solution, one screen, one management to take care of all your hybrid workloads from on-prem to cloud and back. Now, the other point is today, when you talk about an enterprise today, resilience and reliability has become one of the most important point of discussions. And SRE has become one of the critical discussion points today where enterprise wants to build in those reliability at an application and underlying hardware. Now, when you talk about the 7 dimensions of this SRE, recoverability are spoken 2 times in 2 dimensions. And hence, you could understand the importance of it. Compliance, yes, most of your organizations have to have meeting the compliances. I met a lot of banks and a lot of commodities people out here, right? So you are driven by compliances. Now you have 2 options, meeting the compliance in a harder way or in a better or in a much smarter way. And that's where we come and talk to you about this kind of solutions, which will help you to be meeting those compliances in a much more smarter way. And last but not least is what Samit spoke to you about was FinOps, right? Why we are talking about FinOps here? Believe me, today the FinOps is not the charter of talking about can I reduce my size or shut down my server or delete my idle instances. We have gone, or the evolution of FinOps has gone beyond that. Anything that can drive in reducing my total cost of my operations of my public cloud would be categorized under FinOps. So when this solution, when we talk about, if I do not need to build my infrastructure at the DR site and have only the base storage, you can only provision the DR site infrastructure as and when the DR is invoked. You have already reduced the total cost of ownership of your DR site. You talk about your business impact analysis, right? When Samir spoke to you about 10 minutes RTO, imagine the business impact where you would have signed off an RTO of 1 hour and this 1 hour entitles to, let's say, a $1 million loss. If somebody is giving you a recovery in 10 minutes, if you have signed off on 2 hours RTO comparing to 10 minutes, imagine what is your business loss is getting signed off for. Quite minuscule. So looking at also at the financial benefit of it, believe this is some of the solutions that we need to look at and take it forward. Thank you. Any questions, anything you have, do let me know. I'm around.
Thank you, Shantanu, thank you. Last thing, you can find us at booth S1. We are here. You can talk to us, info@datamotive.io and datamotive.io is our website. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your 15 minutes.